How do? And good evening, Silver Jackal. Nice to see you in the chat. So, before we get started with today's stream, I have a couple of questions to ask y'all in the audience. Would y'all like to see something special to me? Are y'all curious as to where the Battlecry Eulalia came from? If the answer to either of these questions is yes, then come, as we delve into a series of games that takes place in a world near and dear to my heart. And that is the world of Brian Jake's Mossflower Country. Let us begin. I am a complete doof. I muted and forgot to unmute my mic during that intro sequence. I do apologize for that. Anyway, back to what I was saying before, rehashing all that stuff. This is Escape the Gloomer, the first game in the Lost Legends of Redwall series by Soma Games. For those of you who don't know what Redwall is, it is a series of children's books written by British author Brian Jakes. The first book, Redwall, was written in 1986, and the last book, The Road Crew, was published in 2011. Unfortunately, there were no further books after the fact because Sir Jakes passed away that year from an aortic aneurysm at the age of 71. Which leads us to the Lost Legends of Redwall. I believe Escape the Gloomer was fully funded and released in like 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. And this is a text adventure in the vein of, like, you might get eaten by a grue, or you can't get ye flask. So there's not really a whole lot of, I guess, animation would be the correct way to say it. It's mostly going to be text and still images. Something else I would also like to note is how I've got this set up. I actually do have notes on my phone that I will be referencing periodically to provide further context as things pop up, or just point out references that the game might happen to make. And it's also where I look at Twitch chat. So I have the game on full screen and I'm looking at chat on my phone and also swapping between chat and notes. So if I don't answer or see your chat, rest assured I will be looking more periodically than normal. I'm just having to jump between multiple screens. Okay, let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, The Lost Legends of Redwall. For the most part, the games are their own self-contained stories that will more often than not usually just reference events from the book. This mostly is in the form of little like one-off side references or maybe a name drop or two. Very rarely a character from the book will appear, or from the books will appear, but not very often, because like I said, most of the Lost Legends of Redwall are original self-contained stories that can be completely ignored if you're one of those purist types. But the Escape the Gloomer here is the one exception to that. This one is an original story, yes, but it's not separate from the mainline books. It actually runs parallel to one of them. This one runs parallel to the second book in the series, which was released in 1998, titled Mossflower. So let's go ahead and click on this real quick. I'll need to go to the main menu.
Here is a summary.
No. Go away. Don't need that right now. We are going to go to the gallery, so that way I can give some, just have something for y'all to look at to give more contextual information. While I give off this spiel, let me turn off the narrator, because he is being annoying. Thank you. Okay. 1 second. But yeah, so Escape the Gloomer here runs parallel to Mossflower. Specifically, the story of Escape the Gloomer begins about a third of the way through the book. But since Mossflower is running parallel with this story, it would probably help if we understood some situational context from the book itself. So that way you guys can understand what led up to the events of this game. Fair warning for anybody who has intentions of reading the Redwall books. I will try my best to avoid spoilers, but that's going to be kind of hard to do when explaining situational context. So if you care about that, probably mute for the next 5 minutes or so. Anyway, to begin, the context of Mossflower is it is set in Mossflower country. I actually do have an image I can pull up that shows a map of the area from the book itself. So let me filtering. Let me stretch that so that way it's there we go. So this is a map of Mossflower country as it appears in the book. Every single one of the Redwall books has one of these in just inside the cover, so that way you can see the varying the various geographical areas that the story takes place across. So the context here is that there in the center you have a fortress Cotir. During the time that Mossflower is set in the canon, Mossflower country was being ruled over by a clan of wildcats called the Green Eyes clan. The current ruler at the time of the story begins is one Verduga Green Eyes, son of King Mortspear and brother to Ungatrun. Ungatrun is important for a book later on, but that's probably not going to be relevant because he never gets mentioned at all, but it helps for context. Also living with him at the castle are his two children, Sarmina Green Eyes and Gingivir Green Eyes. Verduga is old and his health is failing. So Gingivir, with the help of their loyal fox Fortunata, has his medicine brewed, and Gingivir personally delivers the medicine to Verduga. What Verduga and Gingivir are unaware of, however, is that Sarmina, Gingivir's youngest younger sibling, has been colluding with Fortunata to try and take the throne. She has been secretly poisoning the medicine to let her father die of it, and since Gingivier is the only one he allows to give the medicine, when Verduga finally does pass, it makes it look like Gingivier had murdered their father. Using this as a justification to throw him in the dungeons, Sarmina effectively usurps the throne. Now, but even before this happens, the other residents of the Mossflower area that just kind of live around were kind of growing tired of the rule of the Thousand Eyes army and the Green Eyes family. So what the Thousand Eyes army had been doing is basically demanding tithes of food, of harvests and stuff like that, because there isn't any hard currency in the books. It's usually a barter system, if any trade is even shown on page, I guess. But the Woodlanders that lived inside the the domain of the Green Eyes family eventually kind of grew tired of this because the tolls were exceedingly high, to the point where a lot of families were starving to death. So, shortly before Verduga's demise, a council had formed called the Quorum, the Council of Resistance in Mossflower. Inside the Quorum were the likes of such characters as Gomph the Mouse Thief, Bella of Brockhall, who is a badger, Skipper Warthorn and his brother Mask, who are otters, Lady Amber of the Squirrels, Dinny the Mole, and the Stickle family, which includes Goody Stickle, her husband Ben, and their 4 kids, Ferdy, Cogs, Posy, and Spike. Those are the main sort of named characters in the Quorum. There's another member that's more important overall to the story that comes on a bit later, closer to when the book actually begins, but for more context, it helps to know who's who. Bella of Brockhall is probably the most important of these characters because she is the owner of Brockhall, who you can see on the right. You can see the tree on the right side of the map. Brockhall is effectively a sort of family manor of sorts situated in the tunnels underneath a giant oak tree, which the Quorum use as their base of operations when resisting the Thousand Eyes army. And right at the beginning of the book, it is winter, and the Stickle family are the only Woodlanders that have not evacuated from under Cotir's shadow. It just so happens that as they're doing so, the final and most noteworthy member of the Quorum happens along and gets accosted by the guards of the Thousand Eyes army, and handily floors most of them before he gets overpowered and bound. This warrior was a mouse who is known as Martin the Warrior. Martin the Warrior had come from the Northlands. If you want to know why he came from the Northlands, you can look at the titular book, Martin the Warrior. It details what exactly he was doing up there. But suffice to say, he was traveling south to get away from the Northlands and ran afoul of the Thousand Eyes army. He was arrested for breaking laws that he did not know about, and pleaded his case with Verduga. Sarmina, however, wanted to see him killed because he broke the law. Gingivier pleaded along with Martin's case because Gingivier not only being more level-headed than Sarmina's frankly crazy, but Gingivier pleaded with Martin's case, and Verduga happened to agree, so he sentenced Martin to live out the entire winter season in the dungeon. It was about midwinter when he arrived, so he was going to live out the remainder of the season. Unfortunately, it was during Martin's tenure there that Verduga got poisoned. So it was only with the help of Gomph the Mouse Thief that Martin managed to escape and meet up with the rest of the Quorum. Shortly after this is when the Quorum, headed primarily by Skipper Warthorn of the Otters and Lady Amber the Squirrel, actually started mounting offensives against the Thousand Eyes army. The Otters were stationed mostly near Camp Willow, which is that little dot you can see between Brockhall and the farm. So they kind of used their natural skills, being otters, to effectively use guerrilla tactics along the River Moss to kind of pick off various soldiers as they gave chase to the squirrels. Getting infuriated by this, Sarmina decided that she wanted to use her family's secret weapon. And that is the titular Gloomer, which is this creature right here. The Gloomer is a giant water rat that lives in the caverns underneath Cotir. So, specifically, if I pull out my copy of Mossflower here, go to chapter 11, page 79. Let's see. This will be a direct quote from the book describing the Gloomer, as the text describes it. Let's see. Okay, so starting on page 79, we can get a description of the Gloomer as it first appears. Far beneath the cells, there was an underground cavern and a great lake. The only one who ever went down to the lake was the guard who was detailed to feed the Gloomer. Once a week, he would take down the refuse from the barracks, leaving it a respectable distance from the post to which Gloomer's long chain was attached at the lake's edge. Verduga had captured Gloomer and brought him to Kotir long ago. The monster water rat was robbed of normal sight after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the lake. It had little hearing and no speech at all. None of this mattered. While it still possessed the instincts of touch and smell, the Gloomer was a killer, savage and mindless, particularly when there was fresh meat to be had. And then, let's see... Okay, so I can continue from here. Fortunata was frightened. This was no place to be in the night hours. Gingerly, she picked up the chain. The rattling iron links echoed eerily around the cold, musty cavern, and what little courage the fox had failed her. She dropped the chain, looking imploringly toward Clud. For context, Clud is the captain of the Thousand Eyes army, or the captain of the guard, effectively. I'm only a vixen. This will take a creature strong and brave as a captain of the guard. The obvious slyness of the remark did not escape Clud, yet he swelled slightly at the flattery. Taking the chain firmly, he nodded at the others. Right, stay out of the way and leave this to me. I know how to deal with Gloomer. Tugging hard on the rusty chain, Clud splashed it up and down in the water as he pulled. The underground lake rippled, and there was an audible gasp of shock from the three onlookers as the Gloomer's monstrous head appeared from the depths like the worst kind of vision from a bad dream. The eyes were staring, sightless white marbles veined with blood-red streaks. The snout ribbed and scarred like a wet black patch of leather. What little fur there was on the head was plastered flat. Water ran off it as the mouth opened wide. Even Clud felt his paws shaking as the Gloomer swam toward land. The sightless eyes were fixed upon the Weasel Captain as if they could actually see him. The mouth worked hungrily open and shut, purple blubbery lips drawn back to reveal curving greeny-yellow fangs, spread this way and that, the very oddness of them adding to their revolting appearance. And that is the Gloomer in a nutshell. You can see they captured that image of him pretty well. So, shortly after this exchange, Sarmina sent Fortunata down to fetch the Gloomer, to sick the Gloomer into the river moss to hunt down the otters that were giving her trouble. Unfortunately for her, the Quorum knew about the Gloomer, and Skipper Warthorn had an ace up his sleeve. He had a water beast of his own, the great pike Stormfin. And this story, Escape the Gloomer, picks up shortly after the battle between Stormfin and Gloomer, which that battle is depicted in chapter 12, pages 82 to 86. Let's see, flip through these pages here. I gotta be careful, this is kind of an old book. Okay. Okay, so this will basically be the entirety of, well, not the entirety, about half of chapter 12. Details the fight between Stormfin and the Gloomer, but it's important to understand situational context here. So, Martin was awake before dawn. He fed the fire, then sat by it. Skipper came and sat with him. Skipper is not named Skipper Warthorn in Mossflower. He did not receive that full name until Legend of Luke. But he is Skipper Warthorn, as Skipper is his title. Now then, messmate, you got a face on you like a wet water beetle's granddad. Why so worried? Martin smiled half-heartedly. Oh, it's listening to those stories that the crew were telling about the Gloomer, I suppose. It's all my fault for coming here and causing trouble for you, Skipper. The big otter gave Martin a hearty clap on the back that nearly sent him head over tail. Ha-ha! Bless your little heart, me old warrior. You don't want to listen to that scuttlebutt. Was that all you was afeard of? You come with me and I'll introduce you to our Stormfin. Stormfin? Aye, Stormfin, matey. Come here to the back of the cave. In the darkness of the cavern recesses, Skipper showed Martin a sluice gate that blocked the canal across the middle. There were narrow spaces in the gate, allowing the water to flow through. At one side was a hollow log. Skipper picked up a cudgel and passed it to Martin. Listen, mate. That big pussycat may have a Gloomer, but us otters got a Stormfin. You start thumping that there log, and I'll raise the sluice gate. Stay clear of the water's edge, though. Mystified, Martin began banging the log. The eerie sounds bounced off the cavern walls as Skipper raised the gate clear of the water. The otter nodded sagely. That'll warn anyone who's in the water to get out. Stormfin's coming. Watch the canal now, and don't forget to stay clear. Far back in the darkness, something was beginning to come forward. A smooth wave rose. It slopped over the sides as the water was pushed along by some tremendous force. Martin was about to question Skipper when the otter lowered the gate slightly, and water began roiling and bubbling. A long shape, like a section of tree trunk, smooth, with a many-spiked dorsal fin emerged. Martin gasped and jumped back. That's Stormfin? Aye, this is Stormfin, matey. Me and my brother trapped him long ago. Skipper leaned forward and patted the giant pike's fin, causing it to lash its tail. The water boiled into a white foam as the otter leaped back, laughing. Ho, ho, ho! Take a look, Martin. You wouldn't like to cross that cove's path if you was out a-swimming. Now, would you? Martin leaned forward. He saw the powerful bony head with its muddy eyes and long hooking underjaw. The mouth opened slightly. He had never seen so many teeth in one mouth. There were row upon row of jagged, backward-curving rippers, needle-sharp and milky white. Stormfin seemed to be smiling in anticipation. With a flick of his mighty silver and black-banded bulk, he butted his head against the lowered sluice gate, anxious to be freed into open water. Skipper stood with both paws on the gate lever. Right then, you old buccaneer, don't eat him too quick now, you'll make yourself sick. Martin helped Skipper to weigh down upon the lever. The sluice gate lifted. Stormfin rushed through, creating a miniature tidal wave as he traveled. Skipper left the gate open. He'll be back in a few days. We coax him in with tidbits. Pity there ain't more than one Gloomer. That pike has a terrible appetite. Panting and rasping, the Gloomer dragged on the leads. The trio looked towards Sarmina as they dug their paws into the turf and were dragged helplessly towards the river moss. Fortunata began to panic. Milady, quick! Give the word, or it will have us in the water! Sarmina extended her paws and raised them as if starting a race. Right, you three. When I let my paws drop the... Too late. Gloomer snapped the lead Fortunata was holding, and the two guards were pulled over on their faces. Immediately they let their leads go. Gloomer splashed noisily into the water. The monster water rat swam about in slow circles, scenting and feeling vibrations in the river current. Without warning, it dived, heading in the direction of Camp Willow. The soldiers of Cotir ran alongside the bank, following Gloomer's progress and shouting excitedly. Look, he's after someone! Hey, Gloomer, eat an otter for me! Don't eat him! Kill 'em all, Gloomer! Rip 'em to bits! A ferret who had run ahead of the rest called back to his comrades. Something's coming! I think it's the otters. No, wait! It's a big fish of some sort! Swift chevrons of water rippled out to both sides of the bank as Stormfin sped downstream like a great arrow. Gloomer thrashed the water as he swam upstream, feeling his prey getting near. Closer and closer, the leviathans came toward each other. Gloomer lifted his snout clear of the water, sucking in a huge gasp of air. He submerged again and waited, facing the oncoming foe, mouth slightly agape, claws at the ready. Stormfin looked as if he was smiling. The underslung jaw clamped shut, pointing at his adversary like a battering ram. He piled on extra speed, drew his fins in tight, and came at Gloomer like an arrow from a bow. The onlookers on the bank saw a spout of water shoot high like a geyser as the combatants crashed together. Gloomer had the breath driven from him as Stormfin struck his ribs, disregarding the pain. The rat sought the pike with his teeth, feeling his heavy claws rake searingly through its scales. With the madness of battle upon him, Stormfin rose clear of the river, swishing his tail in a mighty leap, then twisting in midair. He launched himself back into the water like a downward torpedo with gaping teeth. Gloomer was waiting. He pushed his head clear of the river, sucked in a quick breath, and locked jaws with the descending pike. The surface boiled in a welter of cascading water, shimmering scales and ragged fur, the whole scene streaked with blood. They snapped and bit at each other, locking jaws, rolling over and over, now letting go, now shaking into their holds, contorting madly. Gloomer had the pike by the tail. He chewed voraciously. Pain seared through the big fish, but Stormfin had his enemy by the stomach, and ripped viciously. Sarmina dashed up and down the bank with a spear at the ready. She could not throw it for fear of hitting her destroyer. Mud boiled up from the bottom to mix with the flotsam of combat. Silver scales and gray-black fur became indistinguishable in the melee. Now Gloomer had latched his claws into Stormfin's side and bitten deep into the pike's dorsal fin. Stormfin thwacked away at Gloomer's injured side with his heavy tail like a stout paddle. He had severed Gloomer's tail, and was tearing ferociously at the rat's hindquarters. The need for breath forced Gloomer to relinquish his hold momentarily, and Stormfin slid off like a wraith, following the current. Gloomer surfaced and gulped in several grateful breaths. Dementedly, Sarmina shouted from the bank, "Gloomer's won! Where's the pike? Is it dead?" Fortunata was caught up in the excitement. "It must be, milady. Nothing could stand against the Gloomer for long." The soldiers raised a ragged cheer. It was immediately stifled as Stormfin came back to the attack. Driving low, hard, and fast, the big pike crashed into Gloomer with staggering force, catching him unawares. The huge rat had the breath smashed from his lungs as he was battered swiftly up against the far bank. Falling back into the water, he swallowed liquid instead of air. Still lashing out with tooth and claw, Gloomer was unconsciously inflicting injuries on the pike, but the damage was done. Stormfin knew every inch of his river. He slid into a deep pit beneath the bank and attacked the rat's soft underbelly with the mad power of one who feels victory in sight. Gloomer scratched blindly at the rock either side of the underwater hole, missing his adversary's head completely. Baffled, he tried to turn away. Stormfin's jaws clamped tight on Gloomer's back legs. The monster pike backed water as he dragged the rat backward down the pit with him. The watchers on the bank saw Gloomer's front claws emerge wildly from the water, grasping at thin air before they vanished beneath the surface. The destroyer from Kotir was beaten. Stormfin had finally won. And as far as the book is concerned, that is the end of Gloomer. He never appears again. However, the Lost Legends of Redwall Escape the Gloomer takes place around this time. At least the story begins around this time. And it begins with a young otter named Gillig, who was just sitting off to the side there. So with that situational context understood, we can actually go back to the game. And let's see, I'll need to make a new thing here. So let's go ahead and type in new game here in the command window. Yes. Game's being restarted, and we can start the game proper. Okay, I need to actually turn the narration back on. Let's see, narration. I want to turn off the auto hints, and we should be good to go. Alright, let's get started for actual this time. Okay. Let's hit that. Yeah, there we go.
Strike me
There we
rudder,
go.
matey. Welcome to the Lost Legends of Redwall, Escape the Gloomer, a conversational adventure game in 9 chapters by Scott Adams and the Clopas team, a parallel tale to the Mossflower story, in association with Soma Games, Penguin Random House, and Redwall Limited Company. The automatic hint feature is active. Prologue.
Okay, let me turn that off.
His muscle and sinew lay wasted under the tawny fur that covered his big, tired body. The face was that of a wildcat who had survived many battles. The pointed ears stood above a tracery of old scars that ran from crown to whiskers. He had fearsome yellowed teeth, and the green barbarian eyes still alight with strange fires. His paws beat heavily against the stone as he descended. His withered paws opened the chest he had brought down with him. He pulled the pouch from its robe, placed it inside, and raised the heavy chain from his neck. He held the amulet to his brow, fondly admiring it for several moments before he laid it next to the pouch and closed the chest. Beneath the grub, beneath the cells, present where insanity dwells.
And here we begin with Verduga Green Eyes stashing something in the Gloomer's cave.
Chapter 1. Meet Gillig. Gillig the Otter was armed with his trusty sling, which was a long-distance weapon favoured by otters. He tightly anchored his rope to a huge ballista boulder and descended down the cliff side into the entrance of the abandoned otter halt called Otter's Den. He set about his first task, to find a way into Cotir Castle. Skipper's words of advice echoed through his mind. You'll find the secret entrance all right, matey. You just need to look. What will Gillig do? This is what you must now decide. Try exploring and doing things with what you discover around you, and check your belongings to see what you have. Use full sentences starting with an action verb like enter, examine, take, feel, etc. You can ask for a hint or a summary at any time. You can't lose in this game, so feel free to experiment and have fun.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do to show off some, I guess a little bit of jank, I suppose, is these games are purely like a by fans for fans affair. The actual game's quality is middling-ish. They're above average, I would say. But I don't think Soma Games actually owns the rights to them anymore, so the games aren't maintained. So you might see some oddities like achievements not popping up, the narrator repeating himself, and the text also repeating. Another bug is you see that yellow text. If you see yellow text, that implies an auto hint. That will still pop up even if you have auto hints turned off. Auto hints just removes 99% of them. So, like I said earlier, this is a text-based adventure game in the vein of Thy Dungeon Man or Zork. So you have to type in action verbs and a noun or whatever to try and figure out what it is you're trying to do here. So let's take a look around inside the entrance to the Otter's Den.
The young otter narrowed his eyes and peered into the collapsing halt. The sunlight pierced only a short distance into the halt. All else was swallowed by the darkness. Gillig, taking a quick glance around the room, noticed there wasn't much to look at except for a pile of rubble within only a few paws' length of him.
I also just realized I went off on that tangent and forgot to do the thing. If you actually type in Escape the Gloomer as your first command...
Sorry, good idea, but your timing is off.
I'm not going to get it now because it wasn't my first command, but even if I had done it as my first command, the achievement would not have popped.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Thankfully, you can press these arrows to kind of go back and see previous things if you do stuff like that. So let's see. Wasn't much to look at except for a pile of rubble. Okay. Let's look at the pile of rubble.
Gillig stepped into the halt carefully, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. He scanned the rubble, which was filled with wood, rocks, and even a skull of some unknown beast. His eyes stared fixedly at a peculiar piece of wood. It was long and wrapped at one end. Gillig thought it looked like an ancient wooden torch that was worth taking. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Sorry, I gotta learn to keep my mouth shut and not interrupt the narrator. This game will mostly just be the narrator talking, but I will interject every now and again to provide commentary as I do. So, if we're going to be going into a dark cave, taking a torch would probably be a good idea. Let's look at our inventory and see what we have. I think we just have the sling.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a sling. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Okay, well let's take... Oh, whoops. Dyslexic typing. Let's take that torch.
Gillig grabbed the torch's handle and gave a quick, powerful tug. The otter collapsed backwards, still clutching the ancient torch, as a cloud of dust burst into the air from the collapsing rubble pile. Gillig climbed back to his feet and waved the dancing cloud of dust from his face. Everything around him was bright and fuzzy, his eyes fixed on the swirls of air parading in the breeze. Time stood still as he dreamily smiled at the memory of the day before, surrounded by the joyous feasting of woodlanders in Brock Hall. Martin the warrior, accompanied by Gonf, the prince of mouse thieves, Skipper, the leader of the otters, and other woodlanders, were billeted at Brockhall, where meal times were like a constant feast. The woodlanders began passing food. As Skipper ate, Martin told him of Gingerveer. The wildcat was kindly disposed towards the woodlanders and locked away in the cells deep beneath Cotir by his wicked sister, Queen Tsarmina. During his recent captivity in the dungeons, Martin recalled Weasel Guard's chatter of the late Lord Verduga's scroll of inheritance, which had vanished upon his death. The scroll, the guard suspected, would have named Gingerveer the rightful heir, and not Tsarmina. Martin cleaned the October ale from his whiskers.
Cotir is not easily infiltrated. But if there's a chance that scroll exists, we must have it.
Skipper raised an eyebrow as he quickly gulped the rest of his famous hot root punch. Strike me colours, and I've got just the otter for the job. Gillig shook himself free of his thoughts of the past. The swirling dust cloud had finally cleared. Sunlight overflowed into the room, revealing more of the halt. He looked around now with torch in paw. If he could just find a way to light it. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Something else I'll go over control-wise, because this is literally just a text parser. There is some point-and-click elements, though. As you can see down below the parser here, there's this little picture. If you click on this, it removes the text box and lets you see the image in the background. So if you guys want to see what the background images look like, just ask and I'll do so. So, a little bit more story context. As for why Gillig is being sent here and not Martin himself, despite Martin being more than capable of doing so, Martin is on another quest. While Gillig is down here looking for the Scroll of Inheritance, Bella of Brockhall sends Martin, Gonf the Prince of Mouse Thieves, and Dinny the Mole out west towards the mountain stronghold of Salamandastron on the coast to look for her father, Boar the Fighter, who she believes will be a massive benefit to the Quorum's war efforts against the Thousand Eyes army. So, while Gillig's doing this, Martin's off gallivanting westward. So that's why he's not here. So let's examine that rubble pile, since we didn't really get a good look at it after pulling the torch out.
Gillig looked at the rubble and saw it was filled with rocks and wood scraps. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Well, we're equipped with a sling, and a sling is no good without ammo. So let's pick up a rock.
Gillig picked up a nearby rock from the rubble. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Having ammo's no good if you don't load it, so load sling.
Gillig loaded a smooth pebble into the sling and was ready to fire it. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
And just having one will not do in case we need to fire another one, so let's pick up another rock.
Gillig picked up a nearby rock from the rubble. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Now what about those wood scraps? Let's look at those.
Gillig examined the wood scraps. They seemed worn out and good fuel for burning. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Worn out, probably dry and dusty from who knows how long they've been laying down here. So, if we can find a tinderbox or something, might be helpful to have those to make a campfire. So, let's pick up the wood scraps.
Gillig collected some wood scraps from the rubble. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Let's examine the rubble again, make sure... Actually, let's dig through the rubble, see if there's anything underneath it.
Gillig dug in the rubble, spreading wood shards and rocks all about. When he had finished, things looked about the same as when he started. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Okay, so nothing buried underneath it, so let's look around the general area.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of an ancient, ruined otter halt. From where he stood, the den looked completely abandoned and desolate. The den was lit by rays of bright sunlight that streamed in from the open entrance, thus causing the stirred-up dust motes to glow like strange fireflies. Hanging just outside the entrance and within reach was the end of the rope he had used to climb down into the decaying otter's den. There was a tall, unstable-looking pillar of rubble going up to the rocky ceiling. He saw a number of rubble-packed doorways which were impassable without the help of a mole. Yet there was one doorway which hadn't collapsed. It led into a dark, foreboding tunnel.
Okay, so we've got a dark tunnel. Let's look at it.
Gillig gazed into the dark, foreboding tunnel, and despite feeling anxious, his sense for adventure tingled. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Let's head in. Go to dark tunnel.
He was in front of a dark, foreboding tunnel doorway, which was big enough for him to enter. The only thing that remained was to enter it. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Ah, yes, the classic text parser adventure game. You need to be extremely specific about what verbs you use. Alright, let's see. Enter dark tunnel.
With confidence on his shoulders, Gillig walked into the dark tunnel. A sense of foreboding hung over him as he stepped through its many twists and turns until he could no longer see where he was going. Everything was pitch black ahead, but Gillig felt certain he could leave the tunnel. Straining to see, nothing was visible, and the awful darkness was unbroken.
Okay, so we can't see anything, so that leaves our eyes useless, so we can't look. Let's feel around with our paws, see if we find anything.
Through sense of touch, Gillig investigated the darkness and picked up something he found. He planned to check his belongings later.
Okay, well we can't do anything in here, so let's back out.
Gillig carefully made his way back out of the tunnel to the brightly lit entrance of the halt.
If you're
Gillig
interested...
was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Keep interrupting the narrator. Sorry! If you're interested, Silver Jackal, you can actually still get this on Steam. Let's see. Let's look at our inventory.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying an ancient unlit torch, a fire-starting kit, a small smooth rock, a bunch of wood scraps, a sling. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
And we picked up a fire starting kit. Let's look at that.
He inspected the fire-starting kit closely. It was ancient, but still intact. It contained a small metal bit, a flintstone, and a charred cloth. There was just enough left to work one time. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Well, there's only one thing to do then. If it's only got one use, light the torch.
Gillig was ready to light the torch, but he needed to decide what to light it with. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt. Gillig took everything from the fire-starting kit and lit the torch. After doing so, the remaining bits of the ancient kit were finally exhausted, and it crumbled away. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Okay, so now that we actually have a light source, let's enter the dark tunnel again.
He walked through the open doorway. As Gillig clutched his lighted torch, he gave a huge sigh of satisfaction now that he was able to see in the dark tunnel. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space, and the other way went back to the entrance.
I imagine the other piles of rubble probably won't have anything useful, but we might as well look anyway.
Gillig looked at the rubble and saw it was filled with rocks and wood scraps. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Okay, twisty tunnel, let's look around.
Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space, and the other way went back to the entrance. Gillig slowly walked down the slightly dim path ahead, letting his thoughts wander to the day at the River Moss when the woodlanders had to fight for their lives. Inside the walls of Cotir Castle, the vermin ruler sat in her chamber and summoned her aid.
Listen carefully.
The evil queen Tarmina Greeneyes purred. The vile feline had an idea that would crush the peaceful woodland creatures.
I want you to go back to Cotir and bring the Gloomer here to Revermoss.
Far beneath Cotir Castle, there was an underground cavern and a great lake. The only one who went down to the lake was the guard who was detailed to feed the Gloomer. He would take down the refuse from the barracks, leaving it a respectable distance from the post to which Gloomer's long chain was attached at the lake's edge. Verduga, the father of Gingerveer and Tarmina, had captured Gloomer and brought him to Cotir long ago. The monster water rat was robbed of normal sight after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the lake. It had little hearing and no speech at all. None of this mattered while it still possessed the instincts of touch and smell. The Gloomer was a killer, savage and mindless, particularly when there was fresh meat to be had. At the woodlanders' Camp Willow, within the waters, something was beginning to come forward. A long shape, like a section of tree trunk, smooth, with a many-spiked dorsal fin emerged. Skipper leaned forward and patted the giant pike's fin. "Listen, mate. That big pussycat may have a Gloomer, but us otters got a storm fin." Gillig's thoughts were broken as he walked into the large open space. Gathering his wits, he pondered what else might he discover by looking around and then closely examining things he found.
Way to be subtle as to what to do, narrator. So yeah, he kind of paraphrased the parts of the book that I quoted, but same general idea. Okay, so let's look around the area, see what we can find in here.
Gillig was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance and a bubbling spring streaming into a short tunnel. Gillig strained his eyes in the darkness, but could only see a little above his head on the walls by the light of the flickering torch. Just barely visible, scratched above on a wall, was a riddle. "Playful otters we may be, but fighters fierce upon the sea. Clang the target up above, to find the fun that otters love." Strangely, there was no target in sight. Glancing around, he saw a ring of stones around a blackened pit.
A ring of stones means fire pit. Let's look at that.
Gillig examined the blackened pit and saw the evidence of numerous fires. There was nothing remaining in the fire pit that could be burned. The otters who once occupied the Holt had more than enough wood for a large fire that would light the whole room for feasts. The stones circling the pit were set deeply into the solid floor. Some looked a little cracked from the constant heating and cooling they had undergone. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Well, we just happen to have a large paw full of wood scraps. Let's place the wood scraps into the fire pit.
Gillig dropped the wood scraps he was carrying into the fire-blackened pit. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Light fire pit with torch. Let's see if the... Oh, not rock. Torch.
Gillig tossed the torch into the fire pit and stood back as the fire roared to life. He was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Bright light glowed around the room as the firelight flickered and danced in the fire pit. Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance and a bubbling spring streaming into a short tunnel. High above the fully exposed riddle was a small round target. Down to the rabbits we will go, through the bunny burrow below. They flee from us and hide their food, but we'll bring 'em for hullabaloo. Playful otters we may be, but fighters fierce upon the sea. Clang the target up above to find the fun that otters love. He noticed a fire pit with a burning fire in it. Gillig could not take his mind off the meaning of the riddle. His eyes furrowed at the memory of the day before. At the first light of dawn, Skipper met with Gonf and Gillig. "Gonf, this here is Gillig, the otter
Hi! Pleased to meet you, matey."
Gonf excitedly shook Gillig's paw. The young otter gave a bewildered look to Skipper, who merely laughed. "Now why don't you tell the lad what you told me?" The mouse balladeer quickly responded in song.
The Prince of Mouse Thieves knows a way to get into Cotier today. The Gloomer who's guarded it so, no longer a reason not to go. Within the abandoned hold you'll take a slide to depths, direct to lake. Oh, just find the otter's bunny burrow and you'll know what to do.
The mouse thief grinned from ear to ear. Gillig shook himself free of his thoughts of the past. He suddenly jumped, realizing perhaps he could find the bunny burrow the mouse thief had sung about, and maybe even the scroll itself.
How Gonf knows about this place is anyone's guess, but he's friends with a lot of families around Mossflower, so he probably heard about it from one of the various otter clans around. Anyway, there was a rubble pile earlier, so let's examine the rubble pile.
Gillig looked at the rubble and saw it was filled with rocks and wood scraps. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
I mean, we did dump some of the wood. I wonder if we can make the fire brighter. Let's try that.
Gillig collected some wood scraps from the rubble. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Place wood scraps into fire.
Gillig dropped the wood scraps he was carrying into the fire-blackened pit. The fire flared into its past glory with a new load of fuel. He was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Bright light glowed around the room as the firelight flickered and danced in the fire pit.
Yeah, I got a bot.
Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance and a bubbling spring streaming into a short tunnel. High above the fully exposed riddle was a small round target. Down to the rabbits we will go.
Okay, so we've read all this already. Bots are annoying. Yeah, so he repeated this again. Nothing's really changed, but we do have this large room. So let's examine that target.
With the fire now roaring, he peered above the riddle and saw a target above it. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Well, there's a target. We have a ranged weapon. Only one thing to do. Let's shoot it.
With a stone in his sling, Gillig shot at the target, hitting it perfectly in the center. The stone ricocheted off with a clang and landed in the rubble. A heavy thump sounded in his ears, erupting from the short tunnel. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Okay, well, let's examine the rubble and pick up another rock.
Gillig looked at the rubble and saw it was filled with rocks and wood scraps. Gillig tried to take another rock, but he could carry no more than one rock at the time. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
I forgot. I had had another rock on me already for reloading purposes.
Gillig loaded a smooth pebble into the sling and was ready to fire it. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Oh, no, not the sling. Pick up the rock.
Gillig picked up a nearby rock from the rubble. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
So, we are carrying a sling, which is different from a slingshot. What a sling is usually a cloth or leather pouch of some kind, open on one side, held together by on the sides by two pieces of rope. You load it with a rock, whirl it over your head, and then when you fire it, you whip it forward, releasing one of the, like David and Goliath, exactly. But what the Redwallers, or the Woodlanders who use slings as a weapon tend to do is they get creative with it, because not only can they use slings for slinging rocks at things, some creatures have been known to load the sling with a rock and use it as an improvised flail. So that's another reason, good reason to keep the sling loaded in case we need to belt something over the head. So let's see, I believe it said, the narrator said there was something from the short tunnel, so let's go look at that. Oh.
The shallow stream bubbled from the spring and flowed into the short tunnel of the fire pit room. It looked just large enough for Gillig to walk into. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
There's a spring here, huh? Anything interesting in there?
The floor had a hole no larger than an otter's paw, from which a slow stream of water bubbled endlessly. The spring water flowed into the entrance of the short tunnel. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Let's do a questionable thing. Let's stick our paw in the hole. Let's see. Stick paw into spring hole. Are you serious? I just specified which hole. Okay, let's see. Stick paw into spring.
Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Okay, let's try feel spring.
The floor had a hole no larger than an otter's paw, from which a slow stream of water bubbled endlessly.
Ah, okay.
The spring water flowed into the entrance of the short tunnel. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
The parser does not understand the word dip, so we can't just dip our paw in there and feel around. So I guess we go to the short tunnel then, because we can't mess with the spring. Actually, can we drink from it? Drink from spring.
He had an idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Can we do this?
He had an idea, but
Nope.
decided that would not accomplish anything. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features. The cool waters satisfied his thirst. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
So this right here is an example of one of the bugs that I mentioned earlier, where sometimes the narrator will just double down on what he said before. And here, it's like the parser initially didn't recognize what I was asking it to do, but then did a double take and was like, oh, wait, drinking water is a thing that otters tend to do, and you can do that, sure. So, yeah, I expect seeing stuff like this as the further in we get, it becomes more common. But anyway, let's go into the short tunnel.
Gillig stepped through the water and entered the short tunnel. Gillig was at the end of a very short tunnel.
Okay, let's look around.
Gillig was in the short tunnel which led to a dead end. He was surrounded by pitiful rockwork which went up to the ceiling. Water flowed from the spring in the fire pit room into the tunnel and emptied into a large pool of water in the floor.
Let's examine the rockwork.
The wall had solid features. Nothing was going to break through it. Gillig was at the end of a very short tunnel.
Well, which is it, Mr. Narrator? Let's see. Yeah, surrounded by pitiful rockwork. Is it pitiful or is it impregnable? Which is it? Anyway, let's take a look at that pool. I believe that's what it said. Yeah, examine pool of water.
Gillig examined the pool closer and saw that it was as large around as a fully grown badger. Even as it was constantly fed, it was still full of water and had not overflown. Gillig was at the end of a very short tunnel.
So for those of you not familiar with the Redwall series, that size comparison might seem a bit weird. In the books themselves, creature sizes relative to each other are inconsistent at best. But as the books went on, the sizes kind of became more standardized. Generally speaking, when you're talking about woodlander species, which are considered quote-unquote good creatures, from smallest to largest, you have shrews, moles, mice. Let's see, I think voles are in the small category. And then in the medium category, you've got hedgehogs, squirrels, hares, and then otters. And then on the large side, you have badgers. Badgers are juggernauts, basically. They are huge. If you are in the Redwall universe, the last thing you want to do is anger a badger, because chances are they will just snap you in half like a twig. On the vermin side of things, which is the vermin are the evil creatures, such as Sarmina Green Eyes and her Thousand Eyes army. From smallest to largest, I believe you have rats are the smallest for a given definition of small. Then you have the mustelids, which includes ferrets, stoats, and weasels in the sort of medium category. Foxes are also in the medium category, and then for large, you have wildcats. Wildcats, generally speaking, are pretty rare in the Redwall verse. They're rarer than badgers. They only appear in a few books. But they are considered the vermin equivalent of a badger, so a single wildcat is a force to be reckoned with. Which is the main reason why Bella of Brockhall sent Martin the Warrior to Salamandastron to try and find Boar the Fighter. Because Boar the Fighter, being an equally large creature, could take a wildcat like Sarmina on his own. But anyway, back to the current predicament. This pool of water isn't overflowing while despite being constantly fed. That tells me it probably is deep and it probably goes somewhere. So let's dive in. We're an otter after all, we can swim.
Gillig leaped down into the pool and swam powerfully through the water. The otter skillfully navigated the winding underwater path and swam upward to the surface. He climbed out of the water. Gillig shook his head. A slow smile played on his lips.
Well, it's definitely deep enough for us to swim in, so can we dive under the water?
Gillig leaped down into the pool and swam powerfully through the water. The otter
Okay. Into the damp tunnel. Before quick went up to the ceiling. Let me look at the pool of water again.
Gillig examined the pool closer and saw that it was as large around as a fully grown badger.
Let's see.
Gillig leaped down into the pool.
I know you have to dive here because there's an underwater tunnel. I'm just trying to remember how the game wants you to parse it.
Gillig leaped down into the pool and
Investigate, maybe? That might be what it needs me to do. Nope. Can't investigate something. We hit the target. So that should have... Can we drop a rock into the pool?
He tossed a rock in the water and watched the cascading ripples. Gillig was at the end of a very short tunnel.
Okay. I don't think we're supposed to backtrack, but let me go look.
Gillig stepped through the water and returned to the fire pit room. He was in a large cavernous hall.
Let's see. I'm pretty sure we already hit the target, but let me try hitting it again. Maybe that will do something?
With a stone in his sling, Gillig shot it, hitting the target perfectly in the center. The stone ricocheted off with a clang and landed in the rubble. Gillig listened closely, but unlike the first time, he did not hear anything. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Okay, so I did hit it the first time. I wasn't being crazy. Let's look at some nearby rubble and get some more rocks.
Gillig looked at the rubble and saw it was filled with rocks and wood scraps. Gillig picked up a nearby rock from the rubble.
Yes, thank you. Sling.
Gillig loaded a smooth pebble into the sling and was ready to fire it.
Alright, let's pick up another rock just in case we need it.
Gillig picked up a nearby rock from the rubble.
Right, let's look around and see if we've... Not loom. Look around. See if we missed anything.
He was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Bright light glowed around the room as
Dusty tunnel, bubbling spring. There's the fire pit. Let's look at the spring again.
The floor had a hole no larger than an otter's paw, from which a slow stream of water bubbled endlessly. The spring water flowed into the entrance of the short tunnel.
Okay, let's try stopping it up with a rock. Okay, it's going to be doing this thing again. Place rock into spring.
Gillig attempted to make a dam with the rubble, but the force of the stream was too great. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Do I still have my rock?
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock, a sling.
Okay, so I still have it. I guess I gotta go back to the short tunnel then?
Gillig stepped through the water and entered the short tunnel. Gillig was in the short tunnel which led to a dead end. He was surrounded by pitiful rockwork which went up to the ceiling. Water flowed from
you
the
know what?
spring in the fire pit room into the tunnel and emptied into a large pool of water in the floor.
I bet I have to be specific. Enter the pool.
Gillig leaped down into the pool and swam powerfully through the water. The otter skillfully navigated the winding underwater path and swam upward to the surface.
Okay, it actually specifies underwater path. Okay, enter underwater path. Let's try that. Path is not in your dictionary. Are you kidding me? Underwater tunnel? Because it says there's a path there.
Gillig moved about, gently making his way forward. He did not notice the swarm of angry bees had erupted from the hive until too late. They hovered over him, looking grim and vengeful. He smiled.
Oh, okay. I see what happened here. It glitched. That wasn't supposed to happen. I think what happened there was I actually did the correct thing by diving into the pool, but instead of moving me forward to the room it was supposed to, it sent me back to the short tunnel. I guess the game got confused. Yeah, because it's showing us a bunch of stuff we're not supposed to be seeing yet. Okay. Can I... No, I can't do that. And I can't go back. But yeah, okay, so the game basically just bugged. That's what happened there. So, what was supposed to happen was when you followed that underwater tunnel, you would have popped out through some sort of mechanism that was stopping a hole. Hitting that target opened the stopper and let us get out. And we were supposed to be in this small room, which was the bunny burrow, which had a beehive and a rope and a stalactite leading towards a rocky slope that was effectively a water slide of sorts. And picking up the rope, or moving to pick up the rope, would cause this to happen.
Gillig moved about, gently making his way forward. He did not notice the swarm of angry bees had erupted from the hive until too late. They hovered over him, looking grim and vengeful. He smiled impudently, aware from the sight of his sticky fur he had accidentally brushed the beehive. In the silence that followed, he backed slowly, holding both paws out with an air of innocence. The bees began to attack him. Gillig swatted furiously as the maddened mass forced him flailing around the room. He tumbled over the coil of rope and struggled to extricate himself. Tossing and swiping about, the young otter had fallen over backward and slid into the hole as the rope and beehive trailed behind him. As Gillig fell, he glanced momentarily behind him and read the sign hanging on the wall.
Hark me, hearty. Make a stern rope fast to this ring afore you visit the soft bellies down below.
Whoops, now what? Gleefully, Gillig slid down the water slide. As the young otter played on the slide, he recalled that day at the River Moss, the clash between Gloomer the great rat and Stormfin the enormous pike. Skipper released the giant pike called Stormfin. The pike rushed through the sluice gate, creating a miniature tidal wave as he travelled. Swift chevrons of water rippled out to both sides of the bank as Stormfin sped downstream like a great arrow. Gloomer thrashed the water as he swam upstream, feeling his prey getting near. The onlookers on the bank saw a spout of water shoot high like a geyser as the combatants crashed together. Stormfin rose clear of the river, swishing his tail in a mighty leap. He launched himself back into the water like a downward torpedo with gaping teeth. Gloomer was waiting. The surface boiled in a welter of cascading water, shimmering scales and ragged fur. The whole scene streaked with blood. Stormfin thwacked away at Gloomer's injured side with his heavy tail like a stout paddle. He had severed Gloomer's tail and was tearing ferociously at the rat's hindquarters. Stormfin's jaws clamped tight and dragged the rat backward, down into a deep pit beneath the bank. The watchers on the bank saw Gloomer's front claws emerge wildly from the water, grasping at thin air before they vanished beneath the surface. The destroyer from Cotir was beaten. Stormfin had finally won. Gillig sighed with relief, knowing he would never have to worry about meeting the vile Gloomer. Suddenly, the water slide ended, and Gillig found himself tumbling downwards in the air, head over rudder through a large, dark space. The fall was quickly broken as he splashed down into a dark body of water.
Okay, so before we continue on, you see there they did a sort of abridged version of the fight between Gloomer and Stormfin, omitting how nastily Stormfin tore Gloomer's stomach open. So they kind of had to omit a few details for the story of this game to make sense. But, yeah. Spoiler alert, the game's called Escape the Gloomer because the Gloomer's going to become a problem. But anyway, something else that I think is funny about that is purely like an accent pronunciation thing. He calls a geyser a geezer, so the onlookers on the bank saw a spout of water shoot high like a geezer. Achoo! You kids get off my stream! This is my river, Moss! Get out of here! Oh, just the way he pronounces that makes me think of something silly like that. It's just, come on. The English language is funny. Anyway, let's move on to Chapter 2. After that glitched performance.
Chapter 2. Meet Gloomer. A few days previously, the destroyer from Cotir was beaten. Stormfin had finally won. Or had he? Deep within the cold, dark depths of the River Moss, and unknown to the triumphant Stormfin, the sorely wounded Gloomer quickly squirmed into a tight crevice in the rocky walls of the bank. Instinctively huddling into it to escape the fury of Stormfin, he pushed into the rough, narrow, water-filled tunnel, one just large enough for him, but not the gigantic pike. Safe from the gigantic pike, Gloomer swam up the narrow hollow until he broke through the water with a heaving gasp. Each deep breath echoed harsh against the surrounding stone, informing him that he was in a small cavern. The smells of his fur soaked in blood intruded into his nostrils, and the agony of his legs was more than the beast could bear. His vision was blurred, unable to distinguish anything aside from the light and darkness from the faint phosphorescent glows that filled the room. The room reeled as Gloomer attempted to center himself while he floated in the water. With all his might, he desperately began to search for a way out. Gloomer was floating in some water.
And now, we play as the Gloomer.
Now you play as Gloomer the Great Rat. He is yours to command as you work to rescue him from the cave. He was floating at the surface in a pool of water within a small, faintly glowing cave. Gloomer could see the glow all around him. Everything else was dim and fuzzy to the nearly blind Great Rat.
And that's a point, the Gloomer being blind. You cannot use the look around command. You have to feel around, because seeing's not going to do you any good.
Gloomer ran his tattered paws around and felt a solid ledge jutting out of the water at the level of his head. The rock was jagged and rough in his paws. His claws traced through the rock and became filled with muck. The familiar scent of mud danced through his nostrils. Gloomer was floating in some water.
So I'm actually going to show off something cool here, because we can actually dive back down.
Swimming down into the pool of water and through the short tunnel, Gloomer found himself back in the River Moss. Stormfin sensed Gloomer's presence in the water and made a quick dash at the rat, but Gloomer pulled himself back through the tunnel and into the temporary sanctuary of the cave. Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was floating in some water.
Mind telling me how you feel water drip on you if you are currently swimming in it? Like you are... Oh, he's floating in it. He's not under it. He's on the surface. That makes sense. Okay. Let's do something silly. Let's go back out into the river and go for a joyride. Ride Stormfin.
With a sudden glint in his milky, diseased eyes, the insane Gloomer decided to have some dangerous fun. He dove back into River Moss, and when Stormfin lunged at him, quick as an otter, he pulled himself onto Stormfin's back. It was the ride of a lifetime, as the maddened pike swam in all directions and leaped high out of the water, trying to dislodge his unwanted rider. Eventually stopping near the cave tunnel, Gloomer slipped off and scurried back into the comparative safety of the cave. Whee! What a thrill it had been! Gloomer was floating in some water.
Narrator, truly, your "we" could not have been more enthusiastic. Anyway, we know there's a ledge above our heads, so let's climb up to the ledge.
Gloomer winced in frustration as he slowly paddled forward. He floundered through the water as his tail was no longer able to aid his balance. Within a paw's length of Gloomer, the top of his head bumped into a solid ledge. Exerting all his strength, the exhausted fighter heaved himself onto the rock ledge. Gloomer's nose twitched. The smell of several serpents wafted from the ledge into his nostrils. The great rat could feel the many vibrations in the rock as it slithered closer to him. The fearsome monster quickly attacked the water snake. Though the savage was greatly weakened after his battle with Stormfin, the snake was no match for the great rat. He took a mighty swipe at the large snake, forcing it to retreat to the wall. Sounds of younger hisses filled his ears, and without regard to his wounds, the wrath of the maddened beast was upon them. Silence fell upon the cavern. Finally, exhausting the last of his strength, Gloomer fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, he found his wounds had only just begun to heal. Achingly, he pulled himself up from the ground. The accomplishment sound as Gloomer is a bit different.
I was actually about to mention that they changed the tone for this one. Keep this one in mind, because this is effectively going to be your indication that the Gloomer is nearby.
Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
So while going for a joyride on Stormfin was something you could do, that's not actually what I was trying to do. There's something else you can do here if you jump back into the water. Let's see. Return to water.
He entered the pool of water. Gloomer was floating in some water.
Let's see, if we dive under the ledge...
Gloomer thought of going back down into the River Moss, but the great rat knew he wouldn't survive another battle with the terrible pike. Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was floating in some water.
Okay. Can I just do dive? Does that give me the same message?
Gloomer thought of going...
Yeah, okay. So, same message. We can't actually go underwater. Or can we, if I do go underwater? Just stay there. Don't actually...
Gloomer thought...
Nope. Might be a different ledge, because I know there's a hidden thing you can do if you swim under a ledge as Gloomer. Alright, let's see. So let's climb back up to the ledge.
Gloomer climbed back onto the ledge. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
What do we got?
Gloomer ran his tattered paws around the floor. The solid rock was covered in mud, and the pool of water rested in the center of the cave. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
So notice it specified that Gloomer only ran his paws around the floor. He didn't touch the walls or the ceiling. So let's feel the walls.
Feeling around the sides of the air bubble cave, he felt a hard rock wall with many roots growing from it. One spot, though, was soft and spongy. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Okay, let's feel the ceiling.
He reached up above his head and felt the moist, dripping, solid rock roof. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Drink from pool.
Gloomer drank some water. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Even monster rats need to hydrate. Speaking of... Alright, so let's investigate that soft spot.
Gloomer felt the dense material move inward slightly as his paws pressed the soft, spongy area. The opening was slightly smaller than the bulk of the enormous great rat. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Right, what about those roots?
The root in the wall was as long as his arm and springy. It felt a little like a carrot root, but more flexible. Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
I may have mentioned this back in the Stranded Deep playthrough. In Stranded Deep, there are some trees that you cannot cut down, and that's for a real-world reason. Islands form when enough trees and other kind of plant life actually manage to take root on solid enough ground, and the roots are what are holding the all of the silt and ground and stuff like that together. So roots are effectively like kind of support networks. So if this is a piece of soft soil, that root might be holding it in place. We get rid of the root, we can probably knock the wall down. So let's tug on the root.
Gloomer pulled at the root. The root was firmly attached, and he just could not pull it out, no matter how hard he tugged and tugged. A small piece of the tip broke off and fell into the water and vanished. The root in the wall was as long as his arm and springy. It felt a little like a carrot root, but more flexible.
Well, let's
Gloomer
bite.
was on a rock ledge.
Sorry, narrator, didn't mean to interrupt again. Let's try biting into it.
Gloomer grabbed the longest root and gnawed on it until it came off in his paws. Oddly, the root tasted like a carrot, but was a bit more flexible. Again and again, the paranoid great rat checked to see that the root was still with him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Alright, let's try feeling the soft spot again.
Gloomer felt the dense material move inward slightly as his paws pressed the soft, spongy area. The opening was slightly smaller than the bulk of the enormous great rat.
Okay, so we've removed the root, so now it's out of our way. Let's try digging through.
Gloomer snuffled and clawed as he dug with his paws into the dense material of the soft, spongy area. The savage had burrowed out a small tunnel opening. At the very tips of his claws, he felt a plug of material remain, further than his paws could reach. Gloomer sensed his salvation was near, but how to proceed? The great rat was stumped. Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Can we widen the tunnel?
Gloomer reached in the opening as far as he could with just his paw. At the tips of his claws, he felt a plug of material that remained further than his paws could reach. He could not push further, as the opening was slightly smaller than the bulk of the enormous great rat. He tried, but could not reach the material to dig any further. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Well, we have that root. Let's try pushing it through. Stick root into hole.
The evil great rat poked and dug deep into the material with the root. With a whoosh, the root was pulled from Gloomer's grip, going through the matted material into the empty space beyond. As the plug in the wall fell apart, the river moss, with all the speed of a hare warrior chasing vile vermin, flooded up into the previously sealed cave. The water seized the bulk of the great rat and pressed him into the newly created tunnel. Suddenly, he stopped. His enormous body was too wide to go completely through it. Gloomer was stuck like a cork in a bottleneck. Behind him, the force of the river moss pushed on him, and in front of him was pure darkness.
To go, though. Bed calls and works. Needs some up early. Have an amazing stream. Thank you, Silver. I hope you sleep well. And thank you for joining me. I hope to see you whenever you come back by. I also like how they use the accomplishment sound for you getting stuck. Like, congratulations! You managed to dig through. Now you're stuck in a potential life or death situation. Great job! But yeah, the only thing we can really do here is kind of like thrash around. What else can we do? Well, if you do, let me know what you think. Alright, let's see. Yeah, let's try thrashing around.
Gloomer squirmed, shook, wiggled, jiggled, and twisted as best his bulk would allow. Roaring like an enraged badger, the great force of the River Moss suddenly launched Gloomer down the winding dark tunnel. Minutes passed as his body tumbled, then shot like an arrow from a squirrel's bow, he was suddenly hurtling through the air. With a great splash, the giant landed into the familiar waters of the underground lake beneath Cotir Keep. Behind Gloomer, a new small waterfall had appeared in the wall of the cavern. Its waters fell down into the lake in an endless torrent. Gloomer surfaced with water dripping from his ugly bulk. His monstrous head had appeared from the depths like the worst kind of vision from a bad dream. As he inhaled deeply, his nostrils were filled with the scent of fresh meat. The killer rat mindlessly followed the scent and swam forward towards the smell of a live, tasty otter.
Let's start chapter 3.
Chapter 3. The Chase. Gillig the Otter, relaxing peacefully on the surface of Cotir Cavern Lake, dreamily remembered. Skipper had given a good-natured chuckle and slapped a paw on Gillig's shoulder. What we need is a mate who'll sneak into Cotir and retrieve Verduga's scroll, so we can show it to the Thousand Eyes troops. The war will end and there will be smooth sailing. Gillig had found the otter's bunny burrow and ended up in Cotir Cavern all right, just with no way out at the moment, but at least he was here. Gillig's daydream was suddenly broken as he was tossed about by waves created by the new waterfall. He had looked up in dread to see the evil, monstrous Gloomer coming quickly. Gillig and Skipper hadn't counted on Gloomer being loose in the caverns. It all seemed so simple before. In his mind's ear, Gillig could almost hear what the balladeer Gonf would sing about this new predicament.
A 3-hour ruse, a 3-hour ruse. But things are truly getting rough, and the tiny otter is tossed. If not for the courage of this fearless one, this mission will be lost. This mission will be lost. The Gloomer crashed on the shore of this uncharted hidden lake, with Gilligan, no skipper too, a million cares but he's wise, now moving on with no rest, here in Gillig's exile.
Gillig saw the oncoming vile beast and knew he had to escape the Gloomer. Gillig was floating in the lake. The maddened water rat was making right for Gillig.
And with that title drop, we are probably going to end it here, because the first 2 chapters are pretty short to kind of introduce you to how the game works and introduce you to the 2 main characters of the game, being Gillig and the Gloomer. From here, we're going to be in control of in control of Gillig for the rest of the adventure, but it's also going to be a lot longer chapters from there on. And it's a little short for what I normally do, but I think this is a good place to stop, especially since this is something more narrative-driven, and stopping in the middle of a chapter just wouldn't be right. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it a stream here, and I will see y'all next time. I hope y'all enjoyed and are looking forward to next week, where we continue to escape the Gloomer. Have a good night, everybody, and sleep well.